I'm Julia Albright, and my life was intertwined with the Golden Spoon, my husband Ethan's family restaurant chain. I'd poured my heart and soul into expanding it, only to find myself standing at the precipice of ruin, falsely accused of theft by Ethan's own brother Marcus. The smirk he wore, a veneer of innocence over his undeniable guilt, was a mask I was determined to rip off. As the storm gathered around me, threatening to engulf my reputation and my marriage, I knew I had to act. If you've ever faced betrayal from family, where would you draw the line? Like and subscribe to join me on this journey of shattered trust. For nearly a decade, the Gilded Spoon wasn't just a restaurant chain. It was my second home, a living, breathing entity that absorbed my passion, my nights, and countless weekends. When I married Ethan Harding, he brought me into the fold of the prestigious Harding family, renowned for their culinary empire that stretched across the tri-state area. Richard Harding, Ethan's father and the patriarch of the empire, was a formidable man, a self-made titan who had built the Gilded Spoon from a single, unassuming diner into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. His journey was a testament to his grit, his unwavering vision, and a relentless work ethic that he instilled in every member of his family, or at least, in those he deemed worthy. My role, from the moment I joined the company as a newly minted MBA with a specialization in forensic accounting, had always been the quiet engine behind the scenes. While Ethan handled the front-of-house operations, charming guests, overseeing staff, and schmoozing investors, and his younger brother, Marcus, dabbled in creative marketing, a role that often felt more like an elaborate social calendar and a license to spend lavishly on questionable endeavors. I was the one ensuring every dime was accounted for, every vendor paid, and every profit margin maximized across our growing network of a dozen high-volume restaurants. My meticulous nature, my ability to untangle complex financial webs, and my unwavering commitment to the bottom line made me indispensable. I implemented new, more efficient inventory systems, negotiated bulk deals with suppliers that saved us hundreds of thousands annually, and even revamped the entire payroll system, streamlining what had once been a cumbersome, error-prone process. I took immense pride in my work, not just because it was my job, but because it was for Ethan, for his family, and for the enduring legacy of the Gilded Spoon. The Hardings, particularly Richard, had grown to trust my judgment implicitly. During critical board meetings, amidst passionate debates about expansion or new menu items, Richard would often defer to my financial insights. "Julia sees the numbers, she knows the true cost," he'd often say, his voice carrying the weight of finality. This burgeoning respect from the patriarch, a man rarely impressed, was a source of deep professional satisfaction, but it also seemed to irk Marcus to no end. He'd often make thinly veiled condescending remarks about my obsession with spreadsheets or my lack of appreciation for the finer things in life, always delivered with a sneer and a dismissive wave of his hand. He'd scoff at my suggestions for cost-cutting, dismissing them as penny-pinching that stifled innovation. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the palpable satisfaction of seeing our revenue grow year after year, a direct result of the financial stability I painstakingly maintained. Our lives revolved around the business, blurring the lines between work and family in a way that was both comforting and, at times, suffocating. Sundays were traditionally reserved for a grand family dinner at Richard and Alina Harding's sprawling estate, a tradition that blended familial warmth with unspoken corporate review. Even these gatherings often devolved into informal strategy sessions, dissecting last quarter's profits or debating next year's marketing campaigns. Marcus, with his expensive tastes and perpetually empty promises of big marketing breakthroughs that rarely materialized, was always eager to spend, but rarely to contribute meaningfully to the arduous, unglamorous tasks that kept the restaurants afloat. He reveled in the spotlight, quick to take credit for minor PR wins that I often felt were a direct result of the financial stability and operational efficiency I had established. Despite the friction with Marcus, I genuinely believed in the family's collective success and Ethan's unwavering commitment to our shared future, which included our joint investment in a new flagship restaurant downtown, a monumental project that had consumed us both for the past 2 years. The pressure of launching the Gilded Spoon downtown, a venture that had stretched our budget to its absolute limits, had been immense. Every expense was scrutinized with a fine-tooth comb, every revenue projection double-checked, every contract meticulously reviewed. It was during this period of heightened financial vigilance that the first tremors of doubt began to shake my carefully constructed world. Small discrepancies, initially dismissed as minor clerical errors, started appearing in the ledgers for the existing restaurants. A misplaced invoice here, an unaccounted-for cash payment there. Nothing substantial enough at first to raise immediate red flags or trigger a full-scale alarm, but enough to prick at my professional intuition. I attributed them to the added stress of the new opening, the increased volume across our locations, perhaps even a new, less experienced bookkeeper I'd recently hired. I assured myself I'd get to the bottom of it once the new restaurant was successfully launched and things settled down. Yet, a quiet whisper of something amiss, a low hum of unease, began to settle in the back of my mind, subtly undermining the peace I usually found in my meticulous work. It was an annoying feeling, a sense that something was off just beyond my immediate grasp. The grand opening of the Gilded Spoon downtown was a triumphant affair, a glittering culmination of years of hard work, significant investment, and countless sleepless nights. The champagne flowed like water, the city's most influential food critics penned stellar reviews, and the reservation books filled up weeks in advance. For a brief, glorious period, the initial financial discrepancies that had nagged at me seemed to recede into the background, overshadowed by the exhilarating success and the collective pride in our newest venture. There were celebratory dinners, toasts to our future, and a pervasive sense of achievement that momentarily eclipsed any nagging doubts. However, once the initial euphoria subsided and the daily grind of managing a thriving, expanding empire resumed, those nagging anomalies in the financial records began to resurface with alarming frequency and scale. And this time, they were no longer minor errors. We were talking about substantial sums, amounts large enough to significantly impact the overall profitability of the entire chain. I'd find large, unexplained withdrawals from petty cash at the busiest downtown location, then similarly large, duplicate payments to a supplier in another city, and then a series of invoices for raw ingredients that simply didn't match the volume of food we were actually serving. The numbers didn't lie, but they also didn't point to a simple mistake or an inexperienced bookkeeper. This was deliberate. This was a pattern. My first instinct, my absolute first and only thought, was to approach Ethan. We were partners in life, in marriage, and in business. Trust was the absolute bedrock of our relationship. I laid out my findings, painstakingly showing him the suspicious entries, explaining the emerging pattern, and vocalizing my growing concern with a professional detachment that belied the turmoil brewing inside me. He listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration, but his initial reaction was one of defensive denial, perhaps born from a deep-seated desire to protect the family name and, more specifically, his brother. "Julia, are you absolutely sure? Marcus handles a lot of the marketing budget now. Maybe it's just creative accounting for some of his campaigns, or a misclassification of funds," he suggested, though even he sounded unconvinced, his words trailing off with a note of uncertainty. The thought of his own brother being capable of such a thing was clearly unfathomable to him. I understood his reluctance to suspect his own flesh and blood, his desire to believe the best, but my professional integrity, honed over years of scrutinizing financial records, wouldn't let me dismiss it. I insisted on a full internal audit of all financial records from top to bottom, every single transaction. Richard Harding, upon hearing my concerns, and after seeing the initial batch of discrepancies I'd quietly highlighted, gave me his full backing, his voice firm and unwavering. "Julia, you've always been meticulous, exceptionally so. If you see something, if your gut tells you something is amiss, then you dig deeper. Protect this family's name and its livelihood at all costs," he instructed, his trust in me evident in every word, a trust I felt a profound duty to uphold. This authorization gave me the mandate I needed, the power to delve into every corner of the company's finances, but it also placed an immense, almost suffocating, burden on my shoulders. I knew Marcus, with his inflated ego and aversion to scrutiny, would resent this investigation deeply, potentially escalating the already simmering tension between us into a full-blown confrontation. Eleanor Harding, Ethan's mother, ever the peacemaker and fiercely protective of the family's image, sensing the impending conflict, tried to smooth things over. She suggested I might be overworked or too stressed from the intensity of the new restaurant's launch, subtly trying to dissuade me from pursuing my investigation too aggressively. She cherished the image of a harmonious family above all else, a facade I was now unwittingly threatening to shatter. As I delved deeper into the financial records, the evidence began to crystallize around one person, undeniably, Marcus. His creative marketing budget, once a vague, almost untouchable line item that he claimed was essential for brand development and innovative outreach, was now grotesquely bloated with expenses that bore no discernible relation to actual advertising or promotional activities. Large sums were consistently paid to obscure shell companies I couldn't trace through conventional databases, often for services like strategic consulting or experiential event planning that never materialized, or if they did, were so vague and ill-defined they seemed to exist only on paper. It wasn't just a handful of fraudulent invoices. It was a sophisticated scheme designed to be obscured within the vast volume of the restaurant chain's daily transactions, a needle in a haystack, but a needle I was determined to find. One evening, working late at the corporate office long after everyone else had gone home, the quiet hum of the servers my only company, I stumbled upon a series of encrypted email exchanges between Marcus and a long-standing supplier for our gourmet meat products. The emails discussed alternative payment methods and off-the-books deliveries that clearly bypassed our standard accounting procedures, signaling an illicit agreement. It wasn't just fraudulent invoices. It was a deeper, more insidious network of deceit, potentially involving external accomplices who were helping him siphon funds from the business. The implications were staggering, not just for the family's finances and the very future of the Gilded Spoon, but for its impeccable reputation and for my own integrity, as I was the one ultimately responsible for safeguarding the books. The weight of this discovery pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating, making it difficult to even breathe. My growing certainty about Marcus's brazen embezzlement cast a long, chilling shadow over everything, particularly over our family gatherings. The tension at Sunday dinners became almost unbearable, thick with unspoken accusations and Marcus's increasingly hostile glares. He could feel the net tightening around him, and his subtle digs escalated into direct, personal confrontations. "Still playing detective, Julia? Don't you have a real job to do instead of poking your nose where it doesn't belong?" He'd sneer across the polished dining table, his eyes glinting with a malicious triumph that sent a shiver down my spine. Ethan, caught excruciatingly in the middle, looked increasingly uncomfortable, visibly torn between his fierce loyalty to his brother and the growing, undeniable trust he had placed in me. He frequently urged me to go easy and not jump to conclusions, his words echoing his mother Eleanor's desperate desire for peace and the preservation of the family facade. But I couldn't. The cold, hard numbers didn't lie, and my conscience, my professional integrity, wouldn't allow me to ignore the blatant criminality I was uncovering. The true turning point, however, came swiftly and brutally, shattering any remaining illusion of family harmony. One crisp autumn morning, I arrived at my office to find a chilling silence, the usual buzz of activity replaced by a strange stillness. My corporate computer, along with several others in the accounting department, was locked down by IT. Moments later, Richard called me into his spacious, meticulously organized office, his face grim, his usual composure visibly strained. "Julia, we have a serious problem," he began, his voice barely a whisper, heavy with a mixture of disappointment and dread. He then showed me an anonymous email displayed on his tablet, purportedly from an inside source, detailing elaborate schemes of embezzlement and financial mismanagement within the Gilded Spoon. The email included a series of damning screenshots of altered invoices and falsified expense reports, all digitally manipulated to appear as if they originated directly from my personal workstation and bore my digital signature. The sender's message was clear and damning. I was the one diverting company funds to offshore accounts, using the stolen money to finance an extravagant lifestyle far beyond my legitimate salary. My blood ran cold. My hands trembled almost imperceptibly as I read the accusations. It was a perfectly executed frame-up, designed with chilling precision to completely discredit me and redirect all suspicion away from the true culprit. The sheer audacity and malicious intent behind it took my breath away. Marcus had somehow gained unauthorized access to my computer, or more likely had meticulously fabricated these documents, knowing that my reputation for meticulousness and my access to all financial records would make me the perfect, most believable scapegoat. Ethan was present during this devastating confrontation, his face a mixture of shock and profound disbelief. He looked at me, a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a tiny, almost imperceptible waver, and it pierced me more deeply than Marcus's betrayal ever could. "Julia, what is all of this?" he asked, his voice choked with a desperate confusion and a terrible, dawning disappointment. My carefully built reputation, my years of unwavering loyalty, my entire professional life were crumbling under the crushing weight of a calculated, insidious lie. I vehemently denied everything, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands, explaining with a professional detachment how easily digital signatures could be faked, and how the timing of the anonymous email coincided perfectly with my deepening investigation into the actual discrepancies. Richard, while clearly shaken to his core, still held a fragile thread of trust, his decades of experience in business telling him something was profoundly wrong beyond the obvious. "We will get to the bottom of this, Julia. We'll bring in external auditors immediately, no expense spared," he declared, trying to maintain some semblance of control amidst the rapidly escalating chaos. But the insidious damage was already done. The seed of doubt, insidious and poisonous, had been planted, not just in Richard's mind but more agonizingly in Ethan's. Marcus, meanwhile, maintained a facade of shocked innocence, offering feigned sympathy and quiet sighs while subtly fanning the flames of suspicion against me. "It's truly awful, Julia. I always thought you were so dedicated, so trustworthy," he'd lament, his eyes betraying a hint of triumph, a smug satisfaction that fueled my growing resolve for justice. The following weeks were a living nightmare, a relentless, suffocating blur of accusations and interrogations. The external auditors arrived, a team of stern, unsmiling professionals who scrutinized every aspect of my work, digging into my personal finances with a fine-tooth comb and questioning my every move, my every decision. They demanded bank statements, tax returns, and travel records, turning my entire life inside out. Marcus seemed to glide effortlessly through the turmoil, offering helpful suggestions to the auditors that invariably and suspiciously pointed directly back to me, always with a plausible deniability that made my blood boil. "Perhaps Julia needed a new car," he'd muse, or I did notice she was quite stressed around the time these errors appeared. My husband, Ethan, found himself caught in an impossible, agonizing position. He defended me valiantly to his parents, to the auditors, and to anyone who would listen, but I could feel his uncertainty, the growing distance between us, as he struggled to reconcile his deep love and trust for me with the overwhelming evidence Marcus had so skillfully manufactured. The restaurant business, once my profound passion, became a hostile, suffocating environment, tainted by suspicion and the chilling, gut-wrenching realization that my own family, or at least a significant part of it, had turned against me, choosing to believe a malicious lie over years of unwavering loyalty. I knew then that simply clearing my name wasn't enough. Marcus had to pay for his calculated cruelty, for shattering my trust, for betraying his own family, and for threatening to dismantle my entire life piece by agonizing piece. The thought of letting him get away with it fueled a burning, unyielding determination within me. Facing the relentless onslaught of suspicion and the ongoing, suffocating external audit, I realized I couldn't rely solely on denying the false accusations. Denials, no matter how fervent or truthful, would only get me so far against Marcus's carefully constructed web of lies. I needed irrefutable, undeniable proof of his guilt, evidence that would not only unequivocally clear my name but also expose the full, hideous extent of his deceit and the Machiavellian lengths he went to frame me. The first step was to discreetly secure my own digital footprint, to ensure there were no other hidden traps or fabricated documents lurking in the shadows of the company's servers. I knew that Marcus, in his overconfidence and arrogance, might have left digital breadcrumbs, telltale signs of his tampering, especially if he had accessed my workstation or created the forged documents himself. I immediately reached out to a trusted friend from my university days, Alex Chen, who specialized in cybersecurity and digital forensics. He was a brilliant, quiet man with an uncanny ability to uncover hidden data. He agreed to help, understanding the immense gravity of my situation and the absolute need for discretion that bordered on secrecy. Alex began his work by remotely analyzing the network logs from my office computer, diligently searching for any unauthorized access attempts, unusual file modifications that occurred outside my working hours, or any traces of the malicious software that could have been used to plant the fake evidence on my machine. It was a painstaking, tedious process, requiring hours of sifting through lines of code and data, but within days he found something. A remote login from an unfamiliar IP address coinciding precisely with the timestamp on the fraudulent email sent to Richard. The IP address, when meticulously traced, led back to a commercial building in a quiet industrial park, a nondescript location that Marcus had recently leased for what he claimed was a pop-up marketing agency, specifically for the Gilded Spoon's newest venture. It was a flimsy, transparent cover for his illicit activities, and now it was a critical, undeniable piece of the puzzle, linking him directly to the digital assault on my reputation. The discovery sent a jolt of grim satisfaction through me. I was finally on the right track. Simultaneously, I turned my attention back to the suspicious invoices and transactions that had first pricked my intuition. The external auditors, though diligent, were slow and methodical, burdened by the sheer volume and complexity of the Gilded Spoon's sprawling financial records. I, however, had the distinct advantage of intimate knowledge of our accounting systems and, more importantly, Marcus's deeply ingrained spending habits, his favorite vendors, and his financial vulnerabilities. I meticulously re-examined every consulting invoice from the obscure shell companies, every event planning expense that never materialized, every large payment to a seemingly random vendor. My breakthrough came when I cross-referenced the names of the vendors on these highly suspicious invoices with Marcus's personal banking records, which I could, as the company's CFO, legitimately access with careful, authorized maneuvering under the guise of the ongoing general audit. What I discovered was a direct, undeniable pattern. Payments were consistently being routed not to the legitimate vendor companies themselves, but to personal accounts linked to individuals who were either distant, obscure relatives of Marcus or known associates from his past failed ventures, a trail of money that led directly back to him. This wasn't just simple embezzlement. It was a deeper, more insidious, and complex money laundering operation designed to systematically funnel company funds directly into his pockets, bypassing all proper channels. The most damning evidence, however, came from an unexpected, almost cinematic source. One evening, after a particularly late meeting, Marcus had left his personal laptop, which he often used for his company business and his secret dealings, unlocked and still connected to the company network in his office. It was a monumental risk, a foolish oversight on his part, but I knew with a certainty that resonated deep in my bones that I might not get another chance like this. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands remained steady. With a racing pulse, I quickly searched his hard drive for keywords related to the shell companies, the specific fraudulent invoice numbers I had identified, and any communications hinting at his schemes. What I found was a trove of incriminating data, a goldmine of deceit, raw, untampered versions of the forged documents, detailed spreadsheets meticulously tracking the embezzled funds down to the cent, encrypted communications with his accomplices outlining every step of the elaborate scheme, and even multiple drafts of the anonymous email sent to Richard, clearly showing his hand in framing me. There were even copies of his personal bank statements, showing massive, unexplained deposits that correlated precisely with the fraudulent withdrawals from the company accounts. It was a complete digital confession, a comprehensive blueprint of his treachery, right down to the elaborate network of ghost employees he'd been paying for years. I swiftly, almost silently, copied everything to a secure, encrypted drive, knowing that this was the unassailable proof I needed, the smoking gun that would unequivocally expose his betrayal and vindicate my name. The sheer volume and damning detail of the evidence were overwhelming, confirming the terrifying depth of his premeditated treachery and the malicious intent behind his actions. Armed with the undeniable, irrefutable proof, I knew the time for quiet investigation was over. This required a direct, unequivocal confrontation, a moment of reckoning that would shatter the fragile peace of the Harding family forever. I carefully arranged a private meeting with Richard and Ethan in Richard's spacious, wood-paneled office, deliberately excluding Marcus. Eleanor, Ethan's mother, was also present, her presence a silent testament to the immense gravity of the situation, her face etched with a mixture of apprehension and the faint hope that the truth, whatever it might be, would set us free. The atmosphere in Richard's office was thick with unspoken anxieties, almost suffocating. Richard still carried the heavy burden of the anonymous accusations against me, a weight that had aged him visibly, while Ethan's eyes reflected a painful, agonizing mix of loyalty to his brother and a desperate, almost pleading hope that I was indeed right. I began by calmly, methodically laying out the evidence piece by excruciating piece, allowing each damning detail to sink in. First, I presented Alex's forensic report detailing the precise remote login to my office computer from Marcus's leased commercial building, the exact timestamp coinciding with the sending of the fraudulent email to Richard. Richard's eyebrows furrowed in concentration, a deep line appearing between them, but Eleanor, ever the protector of the family's image, looked skeptical. Could be a coincidence, Julia. Anyone could rent office space or use public Wi-Fi, she offered, her voice laced with an uncomfortable attempt at deflection, a desperate clinging to the rapidly eroding facade of family unity. I then moved on to the financial records, projecting them onto the large screen embedded in the office wall, the exorbitant marketing expenses that inexplicably dwarfed actual campaign results, the endless list of vendor payments routed to untraceable shell companies. These shell companies, I explained, my voice clear and steady, don't exist beyond paper. They're fronts, Eleanor, designed to conceal the true recipient of the funds. I then projected a detailed financial analysis, highlighting the consistent discrepancies and the untraceable payments, linking them to specific dates and amounts. These are not just discrepancies, Richard. This is systemic embezzlement, meticulously planned and executed. Then came the most damning, irrefutable evidence, the final nail in Marcus's coffin. I projected the raw, untampered forged documents directly from Marcus's laptop, displaying them side by side with the versions sent in the anonymous email that had so nearly ruined my life. The metadata, the exact timestamps, and the unique digital fingerprints all pointed unequivocally to Marcus's device as the source. There was no denying it. To seal his fate, I then displayed his personal banking records, illustrating with stark clarity how large sums of company funds were systematically diverted into his private accounts, correlating precisely with the fraudulent withdrawals from the Gilded Spoon's ledgers. This, I stated, my voice unwavering, laced with a grim satisfaction, is Marcus's personal ledger, his own blueprint for stealing from the Gilded Spoon from his own family. And finally, I projected the multiple drafts of the anonymous email, clearly showing his malicious intent and his hand in attempting to frame me. And this, I concluded, the weight of the truth hanging heavy in the air, is how he planned to destroy my career, my reputation, and my very life to cover his tracks. The silence in the room that followed was deafening, suffocating in its intensity. Richard's face, usually so composed, so unreadable, contorted with a mixture of profound shock, incandescent anger, and an almost unbearable sadness. He slowly leaned back in his plush leather chair, his gaze fixed on the screen, disbelief warring with the cold, hard, irrefutable facts before him. Eleanor, who had initially been so defensive of Marcus, gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a dawning horror as she witnessed the undeniable proof of her son's profound betrayal. Tears welled in her eyes, not of pity for Marcus, but of a mother's heartbreak at the revelation of her child's true, despicable nature. Ethan, however, reacted with an eruption of raw, visceral fury. "Marcus, no, it can't be. He wouldn't, he's my brother," he exclaimed, slamming his fist on the heavy mahogany desk, the thud echoing in the stunned silence. He turned to me, his face pale, his voice choked with emotion, laced with an agonizing mixture of pain and regret. "Julia, are you absolutely certain? Is there any way this is fabricated, a misunderstanding?" The raw pain in his eyes was palpable, a testament to the agonizing internal conflict he was experiencing, the clash between years of brotherly loyalty and the crushing weight of the truth I had just laid bare. I looked him directly in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "Ethan, I put my entire career, my professional reputation, and my personal integrity on the line to find this. I am certain. Every single piece of evidence, every digital trace, every bank transfer, every email points directly to him, unequivocally." Richard, slowly regaining some semblance of his formidable composure, picked up one of the printed, forged invoices, his fingers tracing the fabricated signature. This is more than just theft, Marcus," he murmured, his voice strained, laced with a mixture of deep shock and profound disappointment. "This is a betrayal of everything this family stands for, everything I built this company on. Trust, integrity, loyalty." Eleanor, now openly weeping, her face streaked with tears, kept repeating, my son, how could he?" The carefully constructed illusion of their perfect family, their harmonious legacy, was shattering before their eyes, exposed by the very numbers I was initially accused of falsifying, numbers that now sang a clear, damning song of Marcus's guilt. Ethan, who had been struggling visibly with the crushing weight of the truth, finally unleashed his own simmering, explosive anger. "Marcus, I defended you. I almost doubted Julia, my own wife, my partner, because you manipulated me with your lies. What kind of brother, what kind of human being does something like that?" His voice cracked with the raw pain of betrayal, the years of unspoken frustrations, the insidious microaggressions, and the simmering resentment finally boiling over into a torrent of righteous fury. He took a menacing step towards Marcus, his eyes blazing with a dangerous intensity, and for a terrifying moment I thought he might physically assault him. Years of pent-up resentment manifesting in a flash of pure rage. The bond between the brothers, once seemingly unbreakable, forged in childhood and reinforced by shared lineage and business, shattered into a million irreparable pieces, revealing a raw, gaping, and seemingly permanent rift. Faced with the undeniable, overwhelming evidence and the collective fury, profound disappointment, and utter heartbreak of his family, Marcus finally broke. His carefully constructed facade crumbled completely, revealing the pathetic, cornered man beneath. He sank into a chair, burying his head in his hands, muttering incoherent, desperate apologies intermingled with flimsy excuses. He blamed immense pressure, bad investments, the stress of the new restaurant, and even, pathetically, the unfairness of being overlooked in the business, always feeling second to Ethan or myself. His confession was a pathetic, self-serving spectacle, devoid of any genuine remorse, merely a desperate, transparent attempt to mitigate the inevitable, catastrophic consequences of his actions. Richard, however, had already made up his mind, his eyes cold and resolved. He informed Marcus, his voice firm and unwavering, that he was immediately terminated from the Gilded Spoon, effective immediately. His access to all company resources, accounts, offices, even the company car would be revoked by the end of the hour. Furthermore, Richard stated without a flicker of hesitation that the external auditors would now be working directly with law enforcement to pursue criminal charges. The karmic retribution, delayed but unyielding, was swift and merciless. Marcus's reign of deceit had come to a definitive, humiliating end. The fallout from Marcus's exposure was immense, a devastating earthquake that shook the very foundations of the Harding family and inevitably sent significant aftershocks through the Gilded Spoon empire. News of the embezzlement within the prestigious family business quickly leaked to the local media, causing a significant tremor of shock and scandal in the traditionally conservative business community. Richard, with characteristic decisiveness and an almost brutal efficiency, moved to control the narrative. He immediately issued a stark, public statement acknowledging internal financial irregularities and assuring stakeholders, employees, and the public that the matter was being addressed with full transparency and the unwavering cooperation of law enforcement. Crucially, he publicly lauded my pivotal role in uncovering the fraud, explicitly stating that my diligence and integrity had brought the truth to light. This act was a profound relief, a public vindication that resonated deeply, restoring my reputation and affirming my indispensable position within the company, not just as Ethan's wife, but as a crucial pillar of the business. The police investigation began immediately, with the comprehensive evidence package I had so painstakingly collected proving to be instrumental. Marcus, stripped of his bravado and family protection, was arrested within days, his mugshot plastered across local news outlets. He faced multiple damning charges of embezzlement, wire fraud, and specifically for his actions against me, potentially aggravated identity theft for framing me. The local media had a field day, sensationalizing the dramatic downfall of the golden son of the Harding family, painting him as a deceptive, greedy villain. It was painful to watch, a public humiliation for a family that prided itself on its unblemished reputation, knowing this was Ethan's own brother, a man once revered. But beneath the pain, the overwhelming feeling was one of justice finally being served, a righteous, burning satisfaction. Marcus's desperate attempts to discredit me from his jail cell, his feeble claims that I was the true mastermind behind everything, proved utterly fruitless. The evidence against him was too robust, too meticulously collected, too undeniable. No one, not even the most cynical reporter, believed his outlandish counteraccusations. Within the family, the dynamics shifted dramatically, irrevocably. Richard and Eleanor, though heartbroken and deeply pained by Marcus's profound betrayal, expressed profound regret for their initial doubts about me, their blind spots concerning their son. Eleanor, especially, seemed utterly consumed by guilt and sorrow. She often reached out to me with tearful apologies, admitting she had been too blind to Marcus's glaring flaws, too eager to maintain the illusion of family harmony, even at the cost of truth and justice. Our relationship, once strained and shadowed by her unspoken protectiveness of Marcus, began a slow, tentative, yet meaningful process of healing, built on shared vulnerability and a newfound understanding. Ethan and I, however, faced a more complex, arduous journey. The lingering shadow of his initial doubt, the agonizing moment he chose his brother's word over mine, persisted like a phantom ache. We spent countless hours talking, peeling back layers of hurt and resentment, him expressing his deep remorse and regret, me grappling with the lingering sting of his betrayal. It wasn't an easy road, requiring patience, forgiveness, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But the shared experience of confronting Marcus's deceit ultimately strengthened our bond, built on a new, more solid foundation of raw honesty, radical transparency, and a deeply renewed, resilient trust. We even started couples therapy, recognizing that the trauma had affected us both deeply and that external guidance could help us navigate the complex emotional landscape that had been laid bare. As Marcus's lengthy legal battle dragged on through the court system, the full, squalid extent of his destructive habits came to light. His lavish spending, his mounting gambling debts, his reckless investments in dubious ventures, and his increasingly desperate involvement with shady characters in the city's underbelly. It painted a chilling picture of a man spiraling rapidly out of control, desperate for money and superficial validation. His pop-up marketing agency, once touted as a brilliant business venture, was ultimately revealed to be nothing more than a transparent front for his illicit activities, a convenient funnel for the embezzled funds. The karmic retribution was complete, utterly devastating for him. He lost his freedom, his once impeccable reputation, his family's trust, and all his ill-gotten gains. The Gilded Spoon, after the initial hit to its reputation and a brief dip in consumer confidence, began its own slow, determined process of recovery and revitalization. Richard, demonstrating his unwavering commitment to integrity, doubled down on transparency, implementing new, even stricter financial controls and internal oversight. He promoted me to Chief Operating Officer, giving me even greater authority and responsibility to safeguard the company's integrity and future prosperity. The road ahead was long, fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, the air within the Harding family and throughout the Gilded Spoon felt clean, purified, purged of the toxic poison Marcus had injected. The trial of Marcus Harding was a grueling, public spectacle that dragged on for what felt like an eternity, a constant, painful reminder of the profound betrayal we had endured. I was called to testify, calmly and meticulously presenting the detailed evidence, answering every single question from the prosecution and defense with precision and unwavering certainty. The prosecution's case was airtight, an impenetrable fortress of facts bolstered by Alex's irrefutable forensic findings, the undeniable bank records, and the internal documents I had so painstakingly collected. Marcus's defense, based largely on trying to portray me as a vindictive, ambitious employee who had fabricated everything out of jealousy, crumbled utterly under the crushing weight of the undeniable, objective facts. The jury, after deliberating for only a few short hours, delivered a unanimous guilty verdict on all counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, and the egregious attempt to frame me. The judge, in a somber courtroom, handed down a substantial prison sentence, a stark and undeniable testament to the severe consequences of his premeditated, malicious actions. His conviction brought a bittersweet closure to a dark chapter. While justice had been served, undeniably the emotional scars remained, deeply etched onto all of us. For Richard and Alina, the profound pain of seeing their son, their golden boy, imprisoned was immense, a heavy, lifelong burden they would carry forever. They began attending family therapy sessions with Ethan and me, not just to mend our fractured relationships, but to truly understand the deeply ingrained dysfunctional patterns that had allowed Marcus's deceit to fester and flourish for so long, unchecked. We talked about the family's deep-rooted pressure for outward success, the unspoken favoritism Marcus had received, the destructive tendency to sweep uncomfortable truths under the rug, and the collective denial that had enabled his behavior. It was uncomfortable, painful, and often tearful work, but it was absolutely necessary for true, authentic healing. The once strained relationship with my parents-in-law, burdened by years of unspoken resentments and recent accusations, slowly, tentatively began to evolve into something more genuine, built on shared vulnerability, newfound understanding, and mutual respect. Ethan and I, having faced the crucible of betrayal and doubt, chose to move forward, committed to prioritizing our own relationship and the health of our future together. The trauma of the frame-up and the profound betrayal had initially put immense strain on our marriage, threatening to tear us apart. But by confronting it head-on, by seeking professional help through therapy, and by recommitting to open, honest communication, we emerged stronger, our bond forged anew in the fires of adversity. He trusted me implicitly, completely, without question, and I, in turn, found a deeper understanding of the complex pressures he had faced growing up within his powerful, yet subtly dysfunctional, family. We started planning for our own family, a future where honesty, integrity, and transparency would be the absolute cornerstones, values we both now held dearer than ever before. The Gilded Spoon also embarked on its long, arduous road to recovery and redemption. The initial reputational damage was significant, leading to a temporary dip in business and cautious whispers from suppliers. But Richard's steadfast, unwavering leadership, combined with my tireless dedication to rebuilding trust with vendors, clients, and employees, slowly but surely began to turn the tide. We implemented rigorous new corporate governance policies, increased financial transparency across all levels, and launched heartfelt community initiatives to reconnect with our loyal customer base, demonstrating our commitment to ethical business practices. The business, now leaner, stronger, and more ethically sound, began to flourish once more, proving its resilience. I, as Chief Operating Officer, found a newfound sense of purpose and power, not just in meticulously managing finances, but in actively shaping the culture of integrity and accountability that had been so sorely lacking under Marcus's influence. The entire experience had forged me into a more resilient, more decisive, and ultimately a more compassionate leader. As the years passed, Marcus remained in prison, a distant, painful memory, a ghost of the past. His actions had forced a painful, necessary reckoning within the Harding family, shattering illusions of perfection but ultimately laying the groundwork for something stronger, more authentic, and deeply rooted in truth. The gilded spoon was no longer just a symbol of culinary excellence. It became a symbol of resilience, of truth prevailing over deceit, and of the profound, often difficult, lessons learned when a family is forced to confront its deepest betrayals. It was a stark, enduring reminder that true wealth lies not in material possessions or a flawless public image, but in trust, integrity, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the searing fires of adversity. My life, once nearly destroyed by a malicious lie, had been painstakingly rebuilt on a new, unshakable foundation of absolute truth. Has someone in your family ever betrayed your trust in a way that forced you to reevaluate your entire relationship? How did you navigate that difficult terrain? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if this resonated with you and share with someone who might need to hear that exposing family betrayal is not only okay, but sometimes necessary for everyone's healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that even the most painful experiences can lead to unexpected growth when we face them with courage and honesty.